a committee meeting for science technology to order, and then I'll give you an update on where everything stands. Senator Anna Vitarte, would you open us in order of prayer, please? You're on 7.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bow our heads. Thank you, Lord, for bringing us here today to deliberate the public's business. I ask that you just watch over us and guide us, and just be with everyone who is in this room as they conduct their business, and watch over their families. In your name, amen.
Thank you, Senator. Just one quick note. We are having an agenda adjustment. We are only going to hear House Bill 1217 today. We are not going to take up House Bill 1478. We'll have a sign-up sheet down here on the table, because I know a few folks do want to speak to House Bill 1217, which we'll go ahead and get started with. And while Representative Irwin is presenting his bill, we will allow you all to come up and sign up if you wish to speak to that bill. All members of the committee have their packets, and y'all are good. I don't see Representative Irwin here. He's hiding behind Byron back there. Hey, Byron. If you can come forward, please. And the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 1217 to you. I've had some a substitute here, so let me quote a number to you. LC 490997S. Okay, we're good there. Let me point out to the committee, if I can, as I'm sure you're probably aware, that due to the pandemic that we've had, the amount of learning online in the state of Georgia has increased significantly.
Representative, if you don't mind, just for a second, I'm going to interrupt you. Taylor, do you mind putting that just on the front pew, and y'all can sign up? That way he's not having y'all in his peripheral vision the whole time. And sorry, Representative, you can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that, after some research and looking into, how many more devices were purchased and handed to children that were taken off campus, how many, devices that were used on campus, increased so dramatically that we've decided to see also the fact that there were 180 school systems doing 180 different things with protecting of those devices. There was no central area to get information. So after a lot of collaboration with the State Board of Education at using their expertise. Now, there are systems that are large enough that have a deep enough knowledge in their staff that they could rely on that for what was best for protecting these devices from obscene material that would possibly be pulled up on there. But other systems might only have one technology person working for them, and they were increasing their devices, thus increasing the demand on that one person. It made sense to develop some type of ability within the State Board of Education here to be able to not only train, but then to disseminate what was good practices and good procedures. There's also a federal law that many of us have become accustomed to, the Cipa Law, which is Children Internet Protection Act, that is out there and was last updated in 2011. The Cipa Act has regulations for how we go about protecting and having firewalls and keeping this obscene material off the devices that are state-owned. Now, we are talking about in this bill only state-owned devices. This is not a personal-owned computer, phone, any of that. This is what the state has purchased. So with that, we dug into some deep research and trying to figure out how we could not only not live off of a Cipa Act that was last redone in 2011, but to get into the 2022 after the pandemic. And we look back at House Bill 1055, which was done, I believe, in 2008. Now, I want to point out that the bill that we looked at, that we last passed protecting these devices, was 2008 in this at the Capitol here. These iPhones were not distributed and out in 2008. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't have some computers and internet access. That just meant that iPhones. So, as you well know, that technology has changed considerably within our society and especially in our schools since 2008. So we started looking back at what was required in 2008, and we started working from there. We talked about digital citizenship here, and the requirement of internet safety policies in public schools. So we developed this House bill that I have before you here, trying to protect our students with the idea that you can't unsee what you've seen. We quickly became a magnet for inappropriate material that was coming to students. And parents, even embarrassingly, were showing me material that their child had accessed on the state-owned devices. So we worked in detail here through that to protect that and to update our current protection for our children. We also tried very hard to do this in line where it would not violate any of our Cipa laws, any part of the Cipa requirement with the federal government. But we felt that we needed to protect Georgia citizens, students, with this act that we have here and not just rely on Washington and a 2011 act to do that. And so, Mr. Chairman, I can go into detail, but it might be best at this time to just cover questions, if that is okay.
I think that sounds great. Members of the committee, do we have any questions for Representative Irwin? I see Senator Al.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming to present this bill. I have some questions related to the language within the bill and the specificity of it. The first question I have relates to line 65. Let me just make sure we're working off the same. Is it LC 490843S is what we're looking at?
You should have 997S in your
Oh,
packet.
okay. That might be
Yeah,
different.
it should
Okay.
be 997.
Okay, that's a different one. Okay. There was a piece in, let me just make sure that it still is in here, about that discusses the type of material that would be filtered out under this bill. And one of the pieces of language has to do with, taken as a whole, predominantly appeals to prurient, shameful, or morbid interests of minors. And I just worry with this word shameful, is that still in the latest substitute? I'm just going to really quickly.
Do we know what line?
Well, it was in
Senator.
line 65, but is it still 65? Okay, great. Yes, okay, great.
Shameful?
Shame, yeah, just the use of that word. And the reason I bring it up is because I worry that with, specifically I think about our students in our schools who identify as LGBTQ or are trying to look up materials related to either like student support groups or literature or those types of things, that I worry that with this use, which is of this word shameful, that it may be considered as being filtered out despite it not necessarily, in my view, posing a harm the same way that some of these other materials are presented. Can you speak to how we can ensure that it doesn't overfilter?
We took these definitions directly out of law, and we took what was harmful to children and took that out of law, and that's where these definitions came from. What we noticed right away when we started defining obscene material, that it was almost offensive to read. And some of the bestiality type talks that were popping up. So we referred, after the definition of obscene, we started referring and at that time to the OCGA code. And that is where that information came out of that code. If Legislative Counsel, he is here. I see Michael Walker, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow me to consult there with him about that definition and that word shameful coming.
Sure, Michael, if you have anything you want to add, I would also point to lines 63 and 64, which are really the qualifiers that would encapsulate 65. So in other words, they're saying that, section 3 there, A, B, and C apply only when it means the quality of description, representation, whatever form of nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse, when it taken as a whole, when it is patently offensive, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that the support group example would apply, but certainly open to your input. If you don't mind stepping up to a microphone, those online can hear.
I think my only point being that the sense of, what is shameful may be more subjective than some of these other.
Sure, I think that's valid.
Number 2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You touched on it as well. I would point to line 68 in the inclusion of "and." So really all 3 of the factors, A, B, and C, would have to be satisfied in order for it to meet this definition. So although something that might be in the broader category of shameful, it wouldn't meet this definition if it wasn't also patently offensive or is lacking any serious artistic, political, or scientific value. So I believe that should be, those subsequent B and C should narrow A to allow for inclusion of perhaps some material the senator has in mind.
Do you have any further questions, Senator, or further comment?
One other question that's not a follow-up, it's a separate question, related to the how you would enforce this filtering mechanism. Can you explain how schools would go about putting on this filtering type software, or would there be companies that are putting contracts forth to the schools that the school systems would entertain in terms of deciding how they would operationalize?
Correct. In the bill, the schools are required to submit to the DOE a usage policy, and the DOE is going to work with everybody and anybody that contacts them about which and what is best at that current time. And we have this updating continuously because we think technology is changing that quickly, that every year the school systems will have a central location and a minimum bar will be set. That's a minimum bar. Now, I will tell you that having researched quite a few of the metro systems, they're already going above what would be that minimum bar. Nothing stops them from doing it. But them getting to that minimum bar would then be checked by the DOE. If the DOE sees that they're not meeting that minimum standard for protecting these devices, they can withhold their technology funds. And for a period in time until they catch up. It does not make sense to take the technology funds away from them if we're wanting them to use them on the right stuff. It's just they could then have them get into compliance and then give the money back that they receive from QBE for this purpose.
And just one final follow-up. I only think about this because I also have kids in public school now who have much more access to devices now, especially since the advent of COVID, being sent home now with laptops and iPads and these sorts of things. What type of, I'm aware there is some filtering or some lockouts that are in place already in the devices they're receiving from schools. Can you explain how these filters and lockouts currently in practice work and what this bill proposes in excess of what baseline filters are already in place?
Again, Senator, many of the systems are going, especially again the metro area, are going above that. That they've been able to vet out who they want, what they need for their purposes, not only for the filtering, but for the cyber attacks that could occur. And but there's a lot of systems that haven't gotten to where they have the time or ability to truly vet it. So they're probably taking the cheapest they can possibly get their hands on and handing it, whether it's working that good or not. And if we take a look at it as a state and that is done for them, they can do easier research to get to that minimum bar. So I will tell you that we haven't done a check to see how many systems are below that bar that we think, but there are abilities to really tighten this up, not only to understand what is happening out there through the training, but then also to continue tightening that bar so that less and less gets around. We have been told too, and I'm not an expert on this, that there are ways to give hotspots. Those hotspots could not be protected. Then a child could access a hotspot from another piece of equipment or device other than the schools, but attaching to that hotspot, which is state-owned, and look at sites that would be completely inappropriate, I believe, to everyone in the room. So that would be one, to be able to communicate. Hotspots have become very popular because of the lack in some of the rural systems of accessibility to the internet, and this was opening that up. We need to make sure that every device that we give has some type of protection to it. Good question.
Any further questions, Senator Dow? Okay. Any other members of the committee have any questions? Senator C, are you on 16?
So what you are proposing now is for the state to have a statewide filtering system so that each school system would be going through the same filtering to make sure students all across the state are doing the exact same thing? Is that what I'm hearing?
Good question. No, ma'am, it is not.
Okay.
We're going to allow the systems still the flexibility to do what they want. The state board is just going to be a central intelligence group that can communicate what is best to them and then monitoring what they are doing. Doesn't mean they have to do exactly what the state tells them. They'll probably give them, I'll throw out a number, 3 to 5 good options. Might even have a few more to that if they're able to develop 5 good options for securing the devices. And then the school system, depending on what they want for their area, can pick through any of those and even add to that list after the State Board of Education looks at it, and then submit it as approval from the state DOE and as acceptable use within their system as protection. So in other words, instead of 180 trying to do their own thing, they're able to have a central location, just like we do for curriculum, for most any other part of education. We've got an area they can come back to and say, give us some advice, show us what is best. And again, that goes back to, there are some systems I think that the DOE can confer with that have been through trial and error with this and can give information of what is best and why they have chosen what they have and gone much further as far as the security than others. But this would be an offering to all of the systems. But again, it is not one system they're choosing. DOE does not want to get into the job of approving one vendor for a product. They need to say that this is what we need done for our students in the state of Georgia, and these are the groups that provide that. And then allowing systems to do what they've done in the past, and that would be to vote on it and get it secured on their devices.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Having heard that, though, if it's all going through DOE and we got all of these systems, 180 across the great state of Georgia, we are asking for the same context or content to be disseminated and making sure it's being filtered out so that our students are not getting stuff that's inappropriate or et cetera. That's the path you're trying to seek. I'm trying to figure out exactly, I hear all of this, and this is a lot, but from my perspective, and I'm a lay person, technology is changing daily. Mm-hmm. So how often are we going to be doing this or having school systems to do this, to make sure that as the world turns, we're not consistently trying to jump the rope?
Another good question. First of all, we do know in quite a few systems, again, more of the rural systems, this isn't done but about every 5 years. So their technology guy just does not have time to do it at what has changed in the last 24 months, 12 months. The DOE, we're looking at this training and this applying of usage every year. So we think every year we're going to pay attention to this, and we're going to try to tighten up. And it is because the exact question you're asking, and that's because technology is changing that much. We have to watch what is occurring and happening, you know, purely just for the protection of our kids. But, you know, I also look at it as, you know, you could imagine if we don't pay attention to citizenship on there, and if we don't pay attention to the training that needs to be in place, there's some other parts of this bill that I think can truly assist us down the road also, and it all needs to be done on a yearly basis.
Senator C, any more questions?
That's it for me,
Great,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you. I believe I saw Taylor Hawkins sign up first to speak. For those of you that have not had a chance to sign up, the sign-up sheet's on the front pew here. Representative Irwin, if you don't mind taking a seat real quick. Mike, could you leave that there? And then after Taylor speaks, actually leave it on the front pew if you don't mind, Mike. And if anybody else wants to sign up, I know we didn't have this sheet earlier. You can sign up during Taylor's presentation, and then when he's done, I'm going to ask him to bring it forward, and then hopefully at that point the list of those wishing to speak is complete. Mr. Hawkins, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Appreciate you all hearing this bill. My name is Taylor Hawkins. I am the Director of Advocacy for Frontline Policy Action. We're an organization that seeks to protect family values and Christian values here in the state of Georgia, and we believe that this legislation goes far to protecting families and protecting children specifically in our state. And we want to commend Chairman Irwin for bringing this legislation, and we'd also like to thank those who've gotten involved and made sure that this language is updated to reflect encrypted traffic and such other things, to make sure that we're not doing something that would have to be changed at a short later date. We also we believe that the clarity in the code section, to answer Senator Al's concern, Senator, that language does come from the Miller test, which is the standard that the Supreme Court set in Miller versus California in 1973. That specific language conforms to that, and that is in OCGA 16 I believe -10-100 through 105, so that if that answers your concern there, that is standard language around what is obscenity and what is harmful to minors. And we appreciate Senator C addressing the fact that it is important that we make sure that this is updated, and so that's why we appreciate the language that talks about annual updates. Very important part as well. We wanted to highlight the fact that the bill does call for protections to be age appropriate. That is something that allows our local school boards the flexibility to decide that something that may have serious literary significance for high school age students doesn't necessarily mean that should be available to middle schoolers or younger. And so we appreciate both the intent behind the bill as well as the content of the bill, and we appreciate the updates that have been made. We believe this bill does balance local control with a compelling state interest to prevent taxpayer-funded technology from allowing our children to access material that is very harmful to them. So we appreciate this bill. We hope that you will vote do pass on this piece of legislation. I stand open for questions.
Any members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Hawkins? Senator C?
I thought we were just in a hearing only.
We are going to hear this here, and I'll take action on this bill as the will of the committee. We are not hearing House Bill 1478, which is the second bill on the agenda.
I got you. And I might not have gotten it right. Miller test.
Yes, ma'am.
Explain to me what we're talking about.
That's a First Amendment test that the Supreme Court set. It was Chief Justice Berger, I believe, who wrote the decision in 1973, clarifying what is acceptable and what is not unacceptable to the public as defined under obscenity or what is harmful to minors. And so that language is the three-pronged test that you see in the language there when it discusses what's harmful to minors. So that's why those specific words are there when it talks about what would be inappropriate material.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator C. I see a question from Senator Au.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. I don't know if this is a better question for you or for the bill sponsor. Related to enforcement, if I could go to line 118 through, I guess, 125 of the bill. It talks about establishing appropriate measures to be taken by the school or the local system in response to violations of these, content filters,
Yes, ma'am.
essentially. So it talks about enforcement against students or school employees who willfully violate the use policy, whether on or off school property. And then later in line 123, it talks about any person who is not a student or school employee who violates the acceptable use policy. For example, if someone took the student's laptop, if a parent was looking at it, maybe trying to test the content filter to see if it was working even. How does one enforce or monitor this, what's called willful violation of the filtering process? How's that going to work?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that is left up to the local school system. That's part of their development of that acceptable use policy, and I'll defer to the sponsor on this if he has any corrections to make. So in other words, we're leaving that up to the local school system to decide how to deal with that. They just have to have a process in place that is robust enough to catch other persons as well if someone were doing that. In other words, not to just test the system, but if they were doing something in a way that would expose school children to those harmful materials, then the acceptable use policy needs to have a process to deal with that.
And I would just add, if I could, Mr. Chairman, and any state laws that are...
Representative Irwin, could you mind stepping up to the microphone, please?
Mr. Chairman, if I could add to that, in any laws that are currently in place with distribution of obscene material. So obviously the school system, if they saw that they were distributing obscene material and what we can call child pornography, something like that, then we would allow the laws to kick in and then law enforcement would deal with that. Does that not register with you, Senator?
No. I understand what you're saying. I just don't know how they're going to check every laptop. I just wondered about, again, operationalizing the enforcement of if the filter's violated. That was just my question.
But I will tell you what I have found out, and y'all are more of the experts on this topic than me, but just like the $6 Million Man, if you were old enough to watch that TV series with Lee Majors on there, they say we have the technology. We can build him faster, stronger, better. I think we have the technology to filter what we want to filter in this obscene market. We do have to keep it current. I do believe that, but I do think we have the technology to be able to keep pornography off these computers and these devices if we come together and choose to get this through.
Thank you. I believe Senator C had a question for Mr. Hawkins or for the bill sponsor.
All of them smarter than me, obviously.
We'll let Mr. Irwin, Representative Irwin, answer your question.
Help me understand or walk me through a filtering program that can factor in context. I just don't know how you get there.
Context. I guess let me answer that the best way I have been able to perceive this myself. If we can walk inside an airport and they can recognize your face and who you are, they can recognize inappropriate body parts for age appropriate, they can content that is put together that is inappropriate, they can recognize that with the technology. Again, I'll go back to with technology and the people that we have doing it, we can do anything we want to do. We have the technology to do it. We just have to get it in the hands of the school people to be able to use it.
Who's watching the monitor? Who is watching those that are building it and weeding out? You got bad apples almost everywhere, and it's hard for me to wrap my mind around how, and I get it. I go through those same airports, so I know technology is going way off the grid, and we got driverless cars and all these things. However, when it comes down to just text in a book and those kinds of things, we're talking about an annual update and those kinds of things. What about the bad apples that are surfing overnight, every night from around the world? Help me understand how we're not looking for 100%. We're just looking for the biggest percentage we can get. Is that fair?
Well, Senator, let me answer it again the best I can. The technology is already there, and we are knowing who is off task. So if we are virtually learning right now and we are off task, that can be monitored to let a teacher know, meaning that they are not working on the assignment that they were given at home. They are working on something else. And so when they get off task, teachers can already be monitored. We for sure need to monitor if they have gotten off task and gone to an appropriate content or site. So it is just how in-depth does that system want to use that off-task monitoring of those students that are there. So again, I'll take it to the technology abilities that we have and that we employ. And again, with every step you take, there can be a cost. So some systems want to go to the very top step. Others are safe with stopping at the first floor. And we're in this bill, we give them that option. We're going to protect them. And then there's some that'll go above and beyond that. And I want that allowed to happen because we also want the example of what is best. And then get years of this, and every year in our training we can show what is best in that training, and other systems then could climb those other steps as needed. And I don't think it's going to hurt either as we start to talk about this, because maybe a statewide contract one day would be more lucrative to systems getting a product, a better product at a cheaper price, because we're buying it in mass rather than buying it at 180 pieces in the state. So that is also hopefully a follow-up with the DOE to this bill after a year or two of paying attention to this and looking and making recommendations to systems that we might be able to follow up on.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman.
Senator C. Recognized Senator Anna Vitarte.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Representative Irwin, I just want to thank you for you and your colleagues' work on this bill. So just kind of basically in a nutshell, we're basically trying to create a consistent level of IT operations in our school districts, and I think also too bringing us. I liked your example earlier about how iPhones didn't exist in 2008. I was going to ask you if the internet existed in 2008, but because every day technology changes. But I think too, we talk about a state government. I think the ongoing threats to our infrastructure, and then I think sometimes we forget that our infrastructure goes all the way down to a family or a child who's bringing home an iPad to do their homework on, and some of our school districts and schools in various different places across Georgia. And I think it's to create that cyber security from in that home all the way up here. And also I think the actors that, could take advantage of that device and open up other apparatuses in a school district to records or other things that, we know bad actors are doing. So I just want to thank you for that. And I know that also too, we have a lot of school districts, especially to your point on the training side of things, who are really creating almost like digital citizenship and cyber safety training, exercising directly for students. And I know some school districts are asking all students in some way, shape, or form to participate in some of those exercises to keep the community safe, not just on the devices, but I think also to keep the community safe peer-to-peer between those students, but also, even that interface with some of the teachers. So just like we talk about in the classroom, if they see something, hear something, or whatever, they know what are those appropriate steps to report something, I think, in this new world that we're in related to these devices. So I think this kind of opens that door to what we see happening in real life on the ground in person, almost in a virtual sense. It's creating that safety mechanism for, I think, our community and law enforcement to use. So I just want to thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you, and I agree. There's quite a bit. When we saw what is happening in Ukraine now, one of the first things that occurred where they were attacked, their entire system, entire country was attacked, whether it was the electrical grid, the fuel pipelines, all the things that we've seen here. We could easily be attacked in our state, in my opinion. in education. So we would hope that some of this would increase our ability to ward off those cyber attacks that would occur to school systems. And by the way, we've had school systems in Metro Atlanta that already have been attacked. So it would be good to continue that education and do it again on a yearly basis at what do everybody need to do, not just one area.
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to recognize Senator Beach.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion if you're
Thank you. I
inclined
believe
to.
we still have one or two more folks that wanted to speak. We'll give them an opportunity to do so briefly because we are running out of time. So I'm going to ask both Mike Griffin and Paul Smith to keep your comments to 2 minutes, please. We'll recognize Mike first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank this committee for considering this bill. We appreciate Representative Irwin for his hard work on HB 1217. I am Mike Griffin. I do represent the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, and we represent over 1 million citizens, over 3,000 churches. And matter of fact, last year at our Georgia Baptist Convention, we passed a resolution dealing with school obscenity and the situations that are going on today. We believe this bill addresses the issues that we need to keep forefront. 3 particular issues today that's always going to be in our school system. And number 1 is transparency, and that is being able to know exactly what's being taught and the content of the material. Secondly, protection. That's always important for our children, and I believe that's exactly what our school teachers want and our leaders do. And then thirdly, accountability. That is to be able to hold people accountable. Who's responsible? Where's it coming from? What is the content, and who's pushing that out there? This does all of that, and so we appreciate, again, Representative Irwin for what he's doing, and we do support this legislation and encourage your favorable vote for it today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. We're going to recognize next Mr. Paul Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak in favor of this legislation. Our organization, Citizen Impact, represents a network of pastors and Christian schools across Georgia. And normally we would not get involved with legislation that just is for public schools. In fact, this bill just recently came to my attention. But I wanted to speak in favor of it because of a couple of the reasons. We have been working for several years with GBI and Senator Randy Robertson to address some obscenity laws that I think are a little lax regarding children. It's come to my attention that things like what GBI calls child erotica is legal here in Georgia, and they've shown me pictures, which, to be honest, I wish I could forget, of children and either in various provocative poses or states of undress that is legal. It's also come to my attention that computer-generated images of child pornography is not illegal here in Georgia. And they've told me, the law enforcement arm has said, sometimes we can't tell the difference between what's computer-generated and what's real. In other words, what we can prosecute and what we cannot. So we're very troubled by that. And so any effort that we can see in improving both limiting children access to obscene materials as well as material that's portraying children and thereby making them even further victims of this, we would support. And one last just anecdote that came about of us working on this. A legislator shared with me how he heard from a constituent as a daughter, I believe he said in 4th grade in the public school system, who during some just quiet reading time where they could have a book or they could have an iPad to read, the boy sitting next to her in the desk was not reading. He was looking at pornography, and he turned his iPad to this little girl and said, "Look." And this mother was obviously concerned and troubled by that easy access to it. It's the technology is beyond me. The hotspot issue, the other issues, but anything we can do to make progress towards this, we would support. And it sounds like the committee would support that. So we would ask for you to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Irwin, if you don't mind stepping back up. I'm going to ask if any members of the committee have any further questions for Representative Irwin. If not, we'll recognize the motion. Senator Beach.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move due pass on HB 1217 LC 490997S.
Thank you, Senator. We have a motion. Do we have a second? second from Senator Anna Vitarte. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, like sign. And I will break the tie in favor of do pass. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for everyone that came today, and this meeting is adjourned.